The wide space we feel in his poems perhaps occurs because the 4 or 5 main images in each poem come from widely separated sources in the psyche. His poems are a sort of railway station where trains that have come enormous distances stand briefly in the same building. Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Eleanor. As you can see, I'm not in my usual library, but I wanted to check in and just tell you a little bit about the poems of Tomas Tranströmer, because I've been reading his book, The Half-Finished Heaven, well, the collection of his poems that is translated by Robert Bly. And I know I mentioned it previously, and I think I put in, if I remember correctly, a poem of his into my last video. But I've been reading and rereading most of the poems in this collection and enjoying them a great deal and thinking about them in a very different way from other books of poetry that I've been reading. So I thought it's worth a check-in. Now, in case you don't know, he's a Swedish poet, so I'm reading him in the translation. His dates, he was born 1931 and passed away, sadly, in 2015. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2011. I would say he's the kind of poet that is best read late at night. There's something very relaxing and soothing about it. Somehow, through his use of metaphor, through the beauty and simplicity of the way he stretches the lines out, and most of the time each line is a complete sentence, or at least a complete thought. And there's a certain steady rhythm to many of his poems that allows you to step into whatever mode of feeling he's feeling. It reminded me of some of these scenes that I love in some of my favorite movies. And I love the scenes simply for the landscape and the architecture itself, rather than what's happening. I'm not talking about dialogue in a movie. I'm talking about when you see a single person at night in a room in a city looking out at the lights of the other buildings, and the contrast there between the one person and the many, and the way it makes you feel, and the way it also makes you rethink the way you see life, and possibly death as well. I was immediately reminded of scenes where you have, for example, a Lost in Translation, where you have Scarlett Johansson and she's sitting sort of on the window seat, on the window ledge of a very fancy Japanese high-rise hotel, and she's looking out, I think it's Tokyo. She's looking out at Tokyo at night. And Sofia Coppola, who directed it, I think she wrote and directed it, she loiters there. She stays there for quite a while. And there's something about that scene that has stayed with me, and I was immediately brought back to that same feeling by many of Tranströmer's poems. Another film that came to mind almost immediately was Her, which is the Spike Jonze movie, because now it came out a long time ago, probably more than 10 years ago, so I'm going to put in a spoiler for the film. If you haven't seen the film Her, I'm going to give you a spoiler. So there's a sense throughout the movie, and this is not the spoiler yet, but that the protagonist, Theodore, is one person in a huge city, and he lives in this high-rise building, in this apartment, and he often is looking out, and there's a sense of loneliness, but also a very strong feeling of connection at times. It's very evocative, that kind of setting. And in the end, he runs down the corridor and knocks on the door of his friend Amy, who's gone through a similar issue. And they go up to the roof. And the ending of the film is them on the roof of this high-rise building, looking out at the never-ending city, the buildings upon buildings, the windows upon windows. This is Tranströmer in a nutshell. Now, when I went back to look at these two, to look at the trailers or see if I could find the scenes from those two movies, I happened across, through chance, a certain thread which I hadn't been aware of. First of all, I didn't know that Sofia Coppola and Spike Jonze had been married for several years. I thought I was thinking of the two films perhaps because I was reminded of them because Scarlett Johansson was in both. But it's more than that. It seems that Sofia Coppola made her film Lost in Translation in response to, the divorce or the imminent divorce between her and Spike Jonze. And then Spike Jonze, in answer to that, made the film Her. And why am I bringing this up in a booktube video? And why am I bringing it up also while talking about Tomas Tranströmer's poems? Is because there's something happening in his poems which I feel Coppola and Jonze also attempted and successfully attempted in their films. It's a way of seducing the viewer. You're seducing the viewer to come closer because you're not giving them all the information that they need. You're giving them all the images that they need. His images are not in themselves difficult to understand. So in a way you can say it's accessible, but it's also really quite odd and mysterious, like very mysterious because, he's reticent, right? I think what he ends up doing with every poem, even though, the poems can vary in subject matter, is he builds a relationship that depends on the reader. His writing, his poems can only exist because he is wooing the reader. And this is the main point of my video that I finally came to. I felt, and I still feel, that when I pick up this book of his selected poems, he is wooing me. He is not in a manipulative sense, don't get me wrong. He has enough respect. He has enough respect for himself and for his imaginary reader to allow mystery into his poem so that he shows me, I'm reading it, he shows me images. He's not trying to teach me. He's painting a picture with words, or several pictures with words that don't seem to always make sense. And because of his reticence, I am being more and more attracted, not to him as a person, but to his poems. And that feeling of attraction is has certain parallels. It may, depending on who you are, it may well remind you of maybe love relationships in your life that you've had. That feeling of attraction to another person's world, another person's psyche, because it plays on your own relationship with yourself. And this is what I'm coming to. So it's your relationship with yourself as a reader. And So you see, we're in a completely different world now from Poetry Thursday. This is not going to happen in a hashtag. It's going to happen at the dead of night when you read something mysterious, which touches something mysterious in yourself. And that's what the film Her and the film Lost in Translation, both films are trying to do as well. They're trying to show protagonists who are in a love relationship or a friendship that's difficult. And in trying to navigate this difficulty, the protagonist must have that experience at night, looking out at the city, realizing that they are alone and they alone can know themselves and make decisions that are best for themselves. Now, if you watch a film, it takes like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then it's done. But if you have a poem, imagine all of that you felt in the film concentrated to best effect in a poem that is so condensed, that takes language and condenses it to such an extent that it might only be 10, 20 lines. And you have it at your beck and call. So whenever you feel that you want to have that experience, you can pick up Tranströmer's book and read poems. And when I did a bit more research, I realized I'm certainly not the only one who's discovered this. And by this, I mean the returning again and again to his poems, the comfort of his poems. It's not a superficial comfort. It's not a didactic comfort. And so it's a very hard thing to talk about, and I've only just started thinking about this particular aspect the last couple of days. It's taken me a while to realize what it is that he's doing. And I really like his poetry, and you might too, so give it a go. In any case, I'll be back in my library next week, hopefully. I wish you all the best. Thank you for being here. And don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind. Bye.